everyone. Welcome to our Montreal Canadiens trade deadline preview show. We are pleased to have one Neville Madill join us from Brock University. He's returning. He was on the show a few months ago with both Mason and Jacob, but he's back solo to talk about his Habs, give us some ideas from a Montreal Canadiens fan's perspective going into the deadline, and we're excited to have him on. How you doing, Neville?
Oh, I'm pretty good. I appreciate you guys bringing me on as your Montreal Canadiens guest, as the expert I am. Obviously, still an amateur for the pro sports, but it should be a fun little pod we got here.
So we're basically gonna talk Habs for about half an hour. We're gonna run through. Eventually, we're gonna get to each of the Canadian teams. We're hoping to find a fan for each team, and this is going to be the Montreal one. So I guess first things first, deadline's not for another month, so it's still a bit early. But just with the Bo Horvat trade and the Tarasenko trade going down in the past week, we kind of decided that the sooner the better to get these going. And are you guys there? Oh, okay. The video stopped.
Yeah.
The video stopped. But yeah, so we just so we're gonna get into Habs stuff. So I guess first things first, Montreal's not really in a similar situation to a lot of the other sort of bottom feeding teams, to put it lightly. Teams like Arizona, Anaheim, Chicago, they all have cap space to burn. Montreal, not so much. One of the most expensive rosters in the league. Neville, what do you really like? What do you see them? How do you see them approaching the deadline? Because I would also argue that they don't have a ton of rentals. So. What are you thinking in terms of Montreal's activity going into the deadline?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to say. I mean, I'm hoping that, since I was on the podcast last time, that, they have been, giving the young guys nice dinners, putting them in the nice hotels, all that good stuff. So all of them want to stay for those long-term guys, because you're right. There aren't a lot of guys who can really be shipped out. Sean Monahan's a name that's kind of been out there, and but he's kind of injured right now. He's coming back in the swing of things, so I don't even know if he'll be able to be traded or what the implications of that are. Didn't really do my research on the injury trade deadline kind of stuff, but there are always those little things that you don't really know about, right? So, there are a few guys. I think. Joel Edmondson's name's been out there, but he's such a liked guy. But it really depends if, that's a value guy that they think they can trade. I think he's pretty invaluable to that team right now because they are so young. I could see a guy like Rem Pitt being traded. Mm-hmm. I think he could really, if he was a third line scoring guy, I think he has 2 years left. Maybe 1 year left after this year. So, in terms of that, I think he could really add some value to a team that just needs a little bit of depth scoring, if they already are kind of big up front. But like I said, I don't think there'll be too much going on. They extended Jake Allen, so they won't be trading him. I think he's a good guy to learn or to teach rather, mm-hmm. Sam Montembeault. So yeah, I don't expect a lot, but we'll see how Kent Hughes and Jeff Gorton, they always got something up their sleeve, so we'll see what happens.
Yeah, it's interesting you bring up Rem Pitlick because he's always someone that I notice when I end up watching the Habs because his speed is just it kind of catches you off guard because you don't really necessarily think of the speedsters in the NHL and think of Rem Pitlick, but he's right up there in my opinion. And signed at 1.1 for the next 2 years. He could be an interesting trade chip for a contender looking to go deep for an extra kind of bottom six guy who has that speed. It could be quite valuable at such a low cap hit too. So yeah, that is an interesting one you bring up.
Took down the Leafs a couple of weeks ago as well. That was always a good feeling as well. So he's showing up in the big moments as well. Like I said, I don't think he would be super prominent as a guy, in the play for a playoff team, but just those timely goals, I wouldn't be surprised if he could be shipped out because I don't think they really factor him into like that core. Like I think he was like a good pickup, like off waivers, but like I said, I think he's a good depth guy that could maybe, contribute to a team like who is cap strapped, like, some of the other Canadian teams that are kind of battling for playoff spots. But yeah, he's skilled, man. Like, yeah, definitely underrated. And I think he could fetch a little bit of value because I don't believe that he's going to be factored into the long-term plans, and he's still young, right? So it's
nice. if he's not, they could absolutely kind of dangle that carrot, because we saw Tampa pay like 2 first-round picks for a guy like Brandon Hagel who had 2 years left.
Yeah.
Kind of similar situation, very low cap hit. Obviously, he won't kind of garner 2 first-round picks, but who knows? Maybe there's a playoff team out there willing to overpay for those 2 cheap years of a depth forward.
Yeah, and I mean, like, guys are already getting traded, right? So
yeah,
that might only increase the value. I don't know about, if that's exactly Rem Pitlick who's going to be, increased value, like some of the other guys who are still available, those, Ryan O'Reillys and Patrick Kane's, I guess. But yeah, it's interesting to kind of see some of the bigger guys get traded early, and then you never know, maybe the Rem Pitlick goes from a 3rd round pick to a second and a decent prospect, right? So kind of we'll see how the scarcity goes throughout the next couple of weeks and what's really available out there, which it's exciting though. I think for Montreal, like, I'm not expecting a lot. Like I think a lot of their, players are in like they have a lot of guys who are in their slots to become those guys. Caulfield, Suzuki, Gooley, I think is going to be one of the best defensemen in a couple of years. And then just so many other prospects that they have, right? So Arbor Jack guy, like I think he could be like a really solid top 4. Like he's got skill, size, like he can play offense. Like he's not just out there getting a couple assists, right? So I think they have the right pieces right now, and it's just if they can get something a little extra, then I think that would be really put them over.
And they have a really good shot at jumping into the top 3 or 4 picks this for this coming draft to pick up another guy to add to that core that they have going right now. Just on Rem Pitlick, he's got another year after this year at $1.1 million. He's got 5 points in 21 games, 3 of them goals. So the production's not there as much as I would have guessed based off of what I've seen from him. Just watching a couple of Montreal games, I always notice him just because of that speed that was mentioned. But yeah, another year after this one, so you get 2 playoff runs at $1.1 million for a bottom 6 guy at 25 years old or something. There's something there, I think, for sure. So that was sort of like looking at some of the lower end names, but like, do you see anything happening with a Jonathan Drouin and Evgeny Dadonov, like maybe even a Josh Anderson, even though he's got so much term, seems like he's been in trade rumors ever since he signed that extension.
Yeah, Josh Anderson, I think he's pretty liked in that locker room though. Like Utah, like if you hear about the other guys, like he's a good locker room guy. So having that around is really good. But like in terms of like the actual like value, yeah, I think there's no way, because it's at 5.5 for the next 4 years, I believe. So yeah, I doubt he'll be taken off. But Jonathan Drouin, I think I don't know. Like I read an article about him in The Athletic during the summer, and he's like really prepping every year, and he kind of told his story. He's like, it's not like I'm not trying. Like, he's been through a couple things, right? So I think a fresh start would be ideal for him. Just like, I think the craze of Montreal coming in here was a little bit much for him, especially because he was in Tampa, which is, at least like a little bit more calm, especially before, they're really pushing for Stanley Cups. And then, just that switch might have been different. So I think he could be traded, but he'd have to go to like a good team to really thrive. Dadonov, like, again, like we'll see. Like I don't know. I don't expect a lot of value or like a lot of picks going the other way. Prospects, no like first rounders or anything. But like I think they can both add value. And it would be nice to get rid of them just so they can personally like have a little bit more of a playoff push, so they can maybe push for a ring, especially Drouin. I think he deserves like some more success and recognition, just because he has been good at points. It just like isn't very consistent, right? So I think they could be shipped off, but they'll be probably mid round picks at best, and then maybe a prospect or two attached to it.
Circling back to Drouin, 12 points in 28 games this year, no goals, at a $5.5 million cap hit. Doesn't really play that sort of like hard-nosed playoff style that every GM loves. So I don't know. I don't really see anything there for him. I thought it was interesting seeing him being a pending UFA though. But yeah, that's just a career that hasn't really gone, I guess you could say, as expected for a whole bunch of different reasons, whether it's injury, whether it's, I think he had some mental health stuff going on a couple years ago. So it just hasn't really gone right for Jonathan Drouin in Montreal, which is really unfortunate. Hopefully he can sort of get things back on track after this season, because at least he's playing again, which was not the case for the last couple of years or so, I believe, right?
Sorry,
Drouin, like he hasn't been playing a lot. He's been like injured and out of the lineup, in and out of the lineup constantly for the last few seasons.
Yeah, like he's been in and out. Like I feel like half of the games I watch, he's not there. And then even in the games that he is there, like he's not super productive in those games. Like you said, like if they want to bring that a depth guy in, then they need to at least like show a little bit of grit or a goal scoring touch like we were talking about before. So I don't think, like I said, like a mid round pick would be fine. I think like a fourth rounder for Drouin, but like I said, I don't even know if people will give that up. Might have to be conditional on if he gets a couple goals in the playoffs or for the rest of the regular season. Yeah, but he hasn't been super noticeable out there, in my opinion.
And looking ahead, as they keep kind of acquiring all these draft picks to build for the future, you can see they have a pretty nice foundation coming along with Suzuki, Caulfield, and then on defense there. Like even a guy like Harris, Jack Guy, other guys you mentioned earlier. As they kind of keep acquiring all these picks going forward, what do you see their biggest need going forward in actually using those picks and coming up? Because they already have five first round picks in the next 3 years. I don't know if they have the pieces to add any more to that, but like that's pretty significant for a team looking to add young talent. So I was just curious where you see kind of their biggest area to address using that draft capital.
Yeah, it's a good question. Like goaltending is something I look at, and I think Montembeault can be a good player. And this year he's even been like had some really good games. Like it's hard with the young core to have a goals against average below 3 with like the team in front of them. Especially they're also super depleted. Yeah. Especially at some points, like right now, they've got like 6 or 7 guys, regulars out of the lineup. So I think goaltending could be a need. Like I said, I don't know if like a first round pick will be spent on a goalie, depending on where they are. If it's a little bit later in the first round, and I honestly, I don't really know, which goalies are coming up in the next couple of years. So that's something I think, if they do have, they have, like you said, Ryan, 5 first round picks in the next 3 years. So if one of those ends up being a little bit later and there's a guy slotted, in the second round, then, maybe take a chance on him for a goalie prospect. Like they have like Caden Primo, which is, a decent prospect. I just don't know what he's going to be like at the NHL level. Cause he hasn't really had much of a sample size. So maybe goaltending, like just restocking that prospect pool would be nice. Like second round pick, second line center, like you got Suzuki. So you got that, two-way forward, high IQ, scoring touch, all that good stuff. So, I mean, in the best possible scenario, we would be getting Connor Bedard, and he could kind of slot into that first round or first line center and keep mixing up my first round picks and line centers. But so like maybe just another center who could be one of those 1-2 guys. Like it doesn't have to be a Connor Bedard either. That would be amazing if it was, but if they can get a guy who can be their first or second line center, I think that would be good. Maybe a couple of defensemen, like probably a good idea. Like if they find like a nice right-handed defenseman with one of those picks in the next few years, then that would be super nice as well. They got Gooley, they got Harris, and they got Jack. I say that's your left side, like set for the next 5 or 10 years. Then you need a little bit more on the other side to balance it out. I guess, I wouldn't be surprised if they go for like another, big towering winger as well. Like Uri it's tough this year with his injuries. And so I wouldn't be surprised. Like you can't really go wrong with a big raw player with some potential. I think with those, they're able to take, not a risk. I think Kent Hughes and Gorton are really calculated with their drafting.
All right, we're back after some technical difficulties that I think we've got figured out. So we're going to circle back to the Uri Slafkovsky talk. I'm not sure if he was mentioned up to this point in the recording, just depending on where sort of the internet sort of went out. But my question sort of before the difficulties was, it's been a sort of a tumultuous season for Uri Slafkovsky, especially given the fact that he's a number 1 pick. Usually it's a lot more smooth sailing for guys in terms of either being in the NHL and contributing or developing. And usually it's the latter. But given all of the injuries with Montreal and assuming that they're going to be offloading some bodies before the deadline, do you think that Uri Slafkovsky should play a role with the Canadiens down the stretch, or do you think he should go back to the AHL for the rest of the year?
I think it's tough to say because like this year's draft class, even like Shane Wright's had similar kind of situation, being on the 4th line, like not really getting the full opportunity that he should get. But in terms of like Uri, like if they want to develop into a professional and they want to keep him there, then, keep him there. Like, I think it's not a bad thing that they're keeping him, in the NHL squad, but it depends. Like, how do you look at this guy developing? Like, do you think this guy is going to be your first line left winger that's, piling in points, 100 points a season? Or, do you see him more as a second line guy who's going to be, like a physical force? So, if you want to keep him and make sure that, he's, developing in the physical game, then, keep him in the NHL. But I think, as a first overall pick, like I think you want him to hopefully reach that, 100-point plateau and make sure that he's really pushing to contribute and play with Caulfield and, be on his line and protect him and all this stuff. So, I think it would, the decision that makes the most sense when I look at it is, put him in the AHL and put him in Laval, make sure that he's, staying confident, offensively. But if you want to keep him with the NHL squad and see what happens, you can always send him down. I honestly, no idea, amateur move by me, but Laval, I believe they're in the playoffs, or in a playoff spot. But if you send him down for playoffs, then that's an even more intense version, and maybe that's the perfect level that he needs to be at. Some AHL playoff level hockey. So, the year hasn't gone amazing for the guy, but I think when they took him over, Shane Wright, sent down back to the CHL. So, it's just been a weird year, and I think that draft class is just like a little bit behind because of COVID. So obviously they didn't do the greatest job of handling him this year, but keep him around where it's competitive, wherever that is, whether that's the AHL, just so his mindset is fixed on winning and not fixed on points or money or any of that stuff.
So I actually didn't realize Slafkovsky hasn't been in the AHL this year. I thought he had maybe done a stint down there. So that'd be interesting, especially just given sort of where Montreal is in the standings at this point. Like you might know, you'd know better than I did. When he was injured, Montreal was probably still hovering around 500, right?
Yeah, I believe so. Like right around there. Yeah.
Okay. Well, now they're like 7 games under 500 and like firmly in sort of Bedard watch. And assuming they sort of pursue that, especially with Caulfield injured and just like everyone else injured as well, like Gooley, like all of their biggest names in terms of either development or just guys in their prime are injured. So they're definitely going to be sort of like eyeing some lottery balls down the stretch. Like it'd be interesting to see what they decide is the best environment for Uri to develop in his rookie season.
Yeah. I mean, like, look at the Leafs. Like, they had so many, high picks, right, for so many years. So, and that hasn't really worked out the best. Like, they haven't, I mean, I don't have to repeat it, but haven't had the best playoff success. So if you look at it that way, like, are you setting the proper culture though? If you're just kind of like tanking and getting like, I think that is such an underrated thing after, especially taking Ryan, I don't know if you took this class, but leadership with Dr. Clutterbuck, like, I was like, wow, like there's so many different factors that go into, making sure you have this amazing team. It's not just getting good players. Like it's a mentality that you need and handling your employees or staff with, the right and the right spot in an organization. So if they want to do that, but like, I really, if they keep winning games, like I'm not going to be like mad about that. But as long as they're competitive, they've been competitive this year. Like they've beaten the Leafs. I mean, Ryan says the Sens own the Habs. I don't know about that, but
I mean, between preseason and regular season, it's like 8-0 this year. That's fine.
I know. It's just like, I don't know. Like, in my opinion, I don't know if that was warranted.
I'm joking. It was a Brady Kachuk goal with a minute left to win the game.
We're making a habit of having people on the pod and then just making fun of their teams.
Oh yeah, we're making enemies. We're out here making enemies big time.
Man, that Kachuk goal was going like 2 feet wide. Like it went off the skate of someone. I can't even remember the defenseman, but I was like, why? Like he celebrated. I was like, yeah, I guess like minute and 20 left or however long there was on the clock. But I was like, dude, you had a muffin onto the net. Like I was going so far.
It's a classic Brady goal.
Yeah. I was like, I mean, like Brady, you do. You like, Sens are in a tough position right now, like trying to maybe grapple onto a playoff spot. So, you got to get your team energized. But I don't even remember what we were talking about. But the Sens. But to make that clear, the Sens do not own the Habs.
Brian, you got any more questions?
Just circling back quickly to the center conversation. I think you were mentioning that you'd like to see maybe the Habs pick up another high-end center in the next little bit here. I'm curious to see where you see Kirby Dach long-term. If you do think they do need to go out and get another centerman, whether it's through the draft or trade in the next couple of years, do you see him as kind of that long-term third center guy, or do you see him better on the wing somewhere? How do you see him fitting into this team?
Yeah, like it's tough to tell because he is so young, and this year, like he hasn't always been playing with Suzuki and Caulfield, so you're not testing him with the best players, or like at least one player that you need that like really, you make that chemistry with them. So I think he's probably a winger. If he hasn't established himself as a center at this point, then I wouldn't be surprised. Maybe he's that guy that you can, if one of your top two centers goes down, then you slot him in there and he can fill that role at least for a little bit. So but I truly think he's probably on the wing. And I really like Kirby Dach. Like, don't get me wrong. I just think he's a towering winger. Like him and like Slavkovsky on the same line. Like that would be pretty cool. As they develop and become, a little bit more prominent with, say like Suzuki in the middle or, maybe Bedard. So, I probably see him as a winger just because, he has had the opportunity, but he hasn't quite solidified it, if that makes sense.
Mitch, do you got any more?
No, I think I'm just about good.
Yeah, I got one more to finish it off if you don't got anything.
Yeah, you go for it.
Yeah, so they just re-signed Jordan Harris, and I think that's a guy that me and Mitch don't know a ton about. And he's gotten some games here and a big opportunity with the injuries and just kind of how the Habs are this year. What have you seen from him, and what do you think of that extension?
I like the extension. He has a lot of potential. He was really good in college, and he was a top defenseman in college, right? So I think he's got that potential. A little bit older, coming out of college, obviously, but either way, like he's solid. He can move the puck. He can skate. I think I'd say he's probably going to be in more of a penalty kill role at the end of it. Maybe that third, maybe fourth defenseman, probably like a fifth or sixth. So that extension is good. I think that kind of, those 2 years, like he can develop a lot, especially if he develops a lot next year. And then, the year after, maybe that's like going to start being like their playoff push, where they really start to develop and put it together. So in terms of him, happy with the extension, but there's, he still has some stuff to prove, but he's, thrived in a lot of situations this year. And I think he has the potential and the guys around him to make, at least for himself, like a great NHL career. And then, maybe be a part of that core for the Habs, in years to come.
Yeah, it'll be super interesting to see what they do coming up to the deadline, because aside from Montreal like last year, I can't recall sort of a situation where a team was so far into LTIR with such an expensive roster while being considered sort of sellers / looking more towards the draft than actual winning games. So it'll be really interesting, especially with new management really settled down there now with Kent Hughes and Jeff Gordon. It'll be, I think they'll have something up their sleeve in terms of selling off some pieces that maybe people may not have anticipated prior.
I think they're going to throw a bit of a curveball at some point. Doc was, a surprising move, like moving on from a fan favorite like Romanov. So I think they got something else up their sleeve, maybe a similar move where like they see a guy who's, underappreciated with another team, or just hasn't had like the greatest start, and then they transform them. I think, that's why I'm like, at the beginning of the year for sure, like Kirby Dach was thriving. It slowed down a little bit. Just, I think that was, bound to happen just with what happened with the team in terms of the injuries and just their development period as a core. But then again, like if they can start to transform, you saw that potential with Doc at the beginning of the year. So I think they can do the same with Slavkovsky, next year when they can get him like prepared and onboarded for, a full year or a full summer of training and programming and all that stuff. So, I think they'll go out and get someone. Another guy that I didn't mention because I don't want to is Pizzetta. He's like just an animal out there, like, going at guys. Like, I think he's that guy that you want to keep. But then again, like Romanov is that guy you want to keep as well. But, you got a lot of value back from him. I don't think you would fetch, like Kirby Dach value, but he's a guy that, he is only 24. So if he could, if he fetches, maybe a good return, go for it. But I think the guys in the locker room probably like him too much to move on from that.
24, making the minimum RFA after the season. That's almost one that you leave up to the chemistry. Like if the boys like him, you just keep him around.
Yeah,
But, Ryan, you got anything else for Neville before we wrap this up?
No, I think that's good. It's kind of interesting to hear where they are because I feel like I haven't paid too much attention to them this year, just with all the injuries. Like I just kind of, I kind of haven't paid attention too much, but just to hear where they are going into the deadline. It's such an interesting spot where they are because like they have so much money, but they need to get, or they don't need to get rid of it, I guess, but they want to going forward. So we'll see how much other teams want to help them.
Yeah, I've got a Sens question for you guys. Like, what do you guys see this like upcoming little bit like for your Sens? Like, I don't know. Like, personally, like I feel like they have a lot of pieces, right? And like, what's their salary cap situation like? I haven't really looked at that for the Sens. Like, what are you guys anticipating for the next month that kind of, you're getting either excited about or nervous about?
I think it's just going to be underwhelming, to be honest. Like, I think we'll get to the deadline and they'll kind of sell off some UFAs and still be hovering around 500, maybe a little bit above. So I think it's going to be fairly underwhelming, but as long as they can kind of stay in that situation, I guess it's okay. I would have loved to see them push a little bit closer to the playoffs this year, but getting out of the basement's a step, I guess.
If they do anything, it'll be for someone with term. There's not going to be if they go
or
get
someone
a rental,
they expect to give term.
If they go get a rental to try to push for a playoff spot, which is just not going to happen, I will probably lose my mind. But
do you think they rushed it a bit like this past off season?
What do you think, Ryan?
I don't think so. And like maybe we can get into this a little bit more when we have our full Sens one.
I don't want to spoil anything.
No, I love talking about this. So, but like maybe the one move that they rushed a little bit was the Talbot for Gustafsson swap.
Yeah.
Like I think Giroux has come in and been great for what he signed for. People thought maybe he would fall off a little bit for 6.5, but he's been all the value for that. And DeBrincat has been kind of touch and go, but he's still like, he's clearly one of the most skilled players out there. He's just kind of cursed right now and can't put up the numbers that he was putting up in Chicago with Kane. So I would still keep DeBrincat too, find a way to make that contract work, but we'll see.
Yeah, we'll see. We're going to have a Sens episode soon. Maybe we'll get you on and you can be the one interviewing us for that.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
but
guys, make sure you guys don't say that the Sens own the Canadiens.
I'll watch my mouth a little bit more.
Oh no, I was like, I just saw that. I was like, I could just slide past it. I was like, I was like,
sometimes I run to social media a little bit too fast when a hype win comes. So my apologies.
No, don't apologize. Just when the Sens are in the playoffs, then you can.
Fair enough.
Start ripping the Habs.
All right, that'll do it for this Montreal Canadiens trade deadline preview. Ryan has hit the outro, which makes it official. Neville, thank you again for coming on, giving us your time, sticking through the technical difficulties.
Appreciate it, boys.